What's good, internet? My name is attackslug, and this video will be a size comparison between the Xbox Series X, the PS5, and every other game console in my extensive console collection, because I feel like you don't quite get the scope and scale of just how big these things are across a video until you actually have them in your home and in your hands. And certainly comparing them with each other is nice and all, but if you don't have them in your home, it's hard to tell. So I'm going to compare to things that you might have in your home in terms of video game consoles. So let's start at the most recent before these two and then work all the way backwards, shall we? Number one, we have the trusty Nintendo Switch, right? There's the Switch in the dock as compared to the Series X and the PS5. So kind of, I mean, the X is just a big cube here, so, but PS5, like that, and yeah, it's hefty, man. So that's the Switch, the Xbox One X, which unfortunately, I don't have the original Xbox One anymore, which was larger than the One X is. So this thing is pretty compact for what's in here with their vapor chambers and what it can do. So pretty much almost the same height as the Series X. So like that, it's gonna be, you know, a bit thinner, but certainly chunkier. Whereas with the PS5, it's comparable in width here and almost comparable in this direction, but obviously a bit higher with that. Now, I also do not have a launch PS4. I used to, I sold it, but I do have the PS4 Pro as compared to this business here. So gonna be, again, same height as the Series X and PS5, gonna be taller as it tends to do. So kind of get that like that. You can kind of get an idea of how this is gonna look in your particular home theater, if you will, and what it is and what it do. But man, I'm glad to no longer have this nonsense of having to plug in things and can't see because it angles at that stupid weird angle of having to plug in stuff. That was never fun. Never fun. That is that console generation. Let's move one back to the Xbox 360. And 360 is interesting because I don't have the original of those either, but I had this was the slim model, or the slimmer model that came out. Not the very last model, which was the E, but it was the one before that. So there you go with the 360 kind of, you know, that one stands up better, but I want to be able to get it on camera here, which is always a problem. So kind of like that, and a bit shorter than the X. And I'd say about as wide as a PS5, but obviously, you know, it's going to be a bit of a difference here in terms of the thickness and all of those type of scenarios. But that is your Xbox 360, a fine console with plenty of fine video game. But also in that console generation, we had the Wii U. So obviously, that's going to be way smaller than any of this stuff because Nintendo doing what Nintendo does. So kind of a non-factor in terms of comparisons, but man, you could fit one, and then so you could fit two Wii U's. This is the height of a PS5 if you had two Wii U's with some duct tape. You know, good times, fun stuff. Now, we have several PS3s here, right? We have the PS3 Super Slim, which was the last model of PS3. So there was the original, the Slim, and the Super Slim. And this one has this is not like, I'm not a fan of this, but, you know, is what it is. But, again, around the same height here as the Series X, and around the same, I'd say, depth as the PS5, you know, kind of comparable, but obviously thinner and all of that stuff. But also, I have the not quite launch model, but the 80 gig PS3 that can still play the PS2 games. And man, in terms of size, this is as close as you're gonna get here to this. Hold on, I can't even with this stuff. This is as close as you'll get to the size and the heft of the PS5, because man, this thing was a beast at $599 US. But still not as tall as the PS5, so it's still not even quite there with that, which is nuts. It's nuts, but man, it plays PS2 games, and that's why I have it still in my collection. And honestly, looking now, this is actually a little bit wider than this PS5. If you kind of line it up, it's about, all right, this is just almost exactly as wide as the PS5. But again, taller, and the thickness is comparable. The Cell broadband engine, just massive, massive damage from that thing. And I'm keeping it around because it still plays those old games. And that I love. But we also kind of in the cross-middle generation there, we have the much tinier, the Wii. So there's the Wii, which if you've played games, even if you're a casual gamer, you're probably gonna have a Wii in your household somewhere. So the Wii as compared to the PS5, just seriously, that is nuts. But again, a whole lot of power into this giant box. And before there was the Wii, we had the GameCube, which is almost exactly the dimensions of this Series X. Like, it's literally almost exactly, besides the handle, the dimensions, which is hilarious. So if you had, say, a GameCube, and then a GameCube, and then a half a GameCube, you would have the height of the Series X here. So get some duct tape and get 2.5 GameCubes, and yeah, I bought this thing used, so it's kind of beat up, but hey, it has the digital out, which is the important part of why I bought it. Because my other GameCube, the much rarer GameCube, there are under 100,000 of these that exist in the world, only released in Japan, we have the Panasonic Q. Where else besides this channel will you see a Panasonic Q, an Xbox Series X, and a PS5? I'm just that weird. And this thing is more depth than the Series X because it plays DVDs as well as GameCube games. Mine is currently broken. I'm working on repairs at the moment, and we'll hopefully have a video on that in the coming weeks. But I have the parts, I just haven't opened it up yet to get it fixed. But yes, Panasonic Q is a oddity and a rarity and worth quite a bit of money. Besides that, in that console generation, at the very early end, before everything started, we had the Sega Dreamcast, which is obviously, you know, pretty small, pretty thin, it's compact, it's thinking, and there are your comparisons for the Dreamcast. Get 2 of those for the height of the PS5. But what killed the Dreamcast, pretty much, was good old faithful fat PS2. Have you seen the pattern of how many of these consoles are the same height as the Xbox Series X? It's kind of unnerving that that's kind of just the height of game consoles at a certain point. So that's kind of cool, but yeah, at the same time, you're gonna get that there, and you're gonna get that, it's about half of the depth. And then of course, compared to the PS5, it is shorter and thinner and just all around, you know, the usual. The usual. Okay, but there was one larger console in that console generation, and to actually go get it here is going to be real heavy. Oh god, one hand. Okay. We have the original Xbox. And this Xbox does still work. The DVD drive laser died, but I have a hard drive in there that has games installed to it with a mod chip, so you know, keeping that thing alive. But this is taller than the Series X, not quite as tall as the PS5 is. And in terms of the wideness, you know, it's comparable. It's comparable. So there's kind of those all lined up with that. But we're not done yet, because I have more game consoles, don't you know? So, the console generation before that was flanked by the Sega Saturn. Speaking of Sega, we have a Saturn here. This also works. It has a mod chip in it, which is fantastic. And that's kind of your, let's see here, depth on that and comparisons for that. You know, I love the Saturn. It didn't get enough support in this country, but hey, what are you gonna do? But what did get a crazy amount of support in this country was the original PlayStation. What started it all, the PS1. So perhaps you have one lying around like I do, and there's kind of your comparisons on that whole a-beat-a-beatness. But the system that I played the most in this era was indeed Nintendo 64, which is obviously weird size. It's kind of hard to really compare to anything because it's such a weird shape for a game console. But hey, speaking of weird shapes, just saying, man. Just saying. All right, so there's kind of your N64 stuff. Now, I don't have an actual Genesis here, but I do have an actual Super Nintendo. So Super Nintendo compared to the Series X, compared to the PS5, dimensions. In that, I also don't have the original NES or a Sega Master System, unfortunately, because, again, at a certain point, finding functional consoles for a decent price when they're that old becomes tricky. But to cap it all off, in terms of game consoles, we have, straight from the 70s, an Atari 2600. Still works, as far as I know. But yes, late 70s, got that wood grain paneling, and honestly, just about as wide and just about as tall as a PS5. So we're kind of going all the way back here to kind of get a good look at what these are, what these do, and how these situate. This plug cannot be unplugged, unfortunately. So everything else, yes. In the olden days, not so much. But of course, I also have a number of mini consoles. We have SNES, we have NES, we have PlayStation, and we have Genesis does what Nintendo don't. And we have a Vita, we have the original DS here, we have a Game Boy Advance SP. I don't have the original, but I had the SP, and it's pretty beat up when I was a kid. We have a Neo Geo Pocket Color is here. That one's pretty rare too. We have the original, still functional, still working Game Boy, including a Zelda in the back. It's pretty beat up, it's pretty dirty, but it still works. A PSP and a second PSP, because sure, why not? And a DSi, a launch model 3DS, and the new 3DS. And finally, a Donkey Kong Game & Watch to round out every single thing that I own in terms of hardware. So there you go. Comparison complete. Hopefully this helped somebody, or it's just me showing off. I don't know. Either way, I'm attackslug. Thanks for watching. More videos right here. See you next time, and I'm out.